Hi, my name is Zilla. This is my Athenaeum, and this is one of my rare vlogs. So this is unscripted content. It is not my normal quality or quantity. If you want more information about what I'm going to be talking about today, I will link it up here, and you can always check out my catalog. The reason I'm making this is because I feel like I can't be on the internet right now. Everything is really traumatic. But I feel like people need to hear a statement from somebody who has a viewpoint that I think a lot of people will not expect. So, I am Jewish. Grew up Jewish. Didn't really identify as anything other than culturally Jewish for a long time. I'm not sure I do even now, but I do feel very Jewish when it comes to perspectives on things like the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, things like the rising tide of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, because they're kind of the same. I'm not trying to do a both sides thing here. This is way too complex for a both sidesism. It's also way too complex for me to simply say free Palestine, although free Palestine. And way too complex for me to say that my heart goes out to the people of Israel, which it does. Both things can be true, and often are, especially when you aren't talking about the biggest political entities in either region, and especially when you're talking about people like me who live in the diaspora, whose connection to Israel is, let's call it tenuous. That's a little generous, honestly. I have a whole 2.5 hour series about Jewish identity that has a whole chapter on the history of how Israel came to be and why it's not great, and a whole other chapter just about the conflict between Israel and Palestine. You know, here in the diaspora, most Jews, not all, I do get you. Most Jews have the basic viewpoint that Jews need to be safe, and also that Israel is conducting genocide on the Palestinians. That the settlements are atrocious and a war crime, and they weren't even really talking about what's happening now, which is so blatant. Even the most actually of nitpickers can't reasonably deny that what's happening now is targeted genocide. I hate Hamas. But I don't hate them as much as I hate the Israeli government. The Israeli government is fascist. I've said so for a long time. Netanyahu is one of my least favorite politicians, right up there with Trump. And, of course, the people that he chooses to place in power, the messaging that he puts out about Palestine, about the necessity of war, is horrifying. But just like we can't blame the Palestinian people for Hamas, because Hamas was created partially out of necessity and partially by the funding of the colonial settler projects, by Israel and the West, who wanted to make sure that Palestinians look bad, that they have an excuse to keep fighting them, to keep terrorizing them. But I also, I'm not going to blame the average Palestinian for that. They're oppressed. You know, you do what you have to. But I also don't blame the average Israeli. They're fighting for their lives, too. Some of them have been misled. Some of them have bought into the propaganda. Some of them have been working for peace, have been working to dismantle the regime that they've been living under. And many of them wish that they could incorporate, or at least give a state, to the Palestinians. I know this because I have friends there, because I know that Israel isn't a monolith, just like the Palestinians aren't a monolith. I am scared for my friends who live in Israel, for my friends who work in Israel but don't live there. This touches on a non-Jewish side of my identity too, because a lot of archaeological work is going on in Israel, and if this had happened a month earlier, there would have been twice as many people I know there working on digs. It's a conundrum in the archaeological world. Like, what do you do? Do you simply not work in a country where there is a fascist regime? And if so, how do you excuse living in the US? Because that's one of the other things, is we are also to blame for this. We being the imperial core, the colonial West. And just like I care about the Israeli citizens who are dying and the Palestinians who are under threat, possibly actual genocide, I can't blame the average American for the Trump regime, for instance. I consider Trump and Netanyahu to be very similar politicians. Netanyahu just has a way better setup to stay in power. Other things too. But some people were tricked. Some people are just hateful. And a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people try to fight against it. But we still live here. And in the UK. And the English are very directly responsible for what's going on in the Middle East right now. Because Israel was made as a settler colonial white supremacist project so that the UK specifically, but the Western white powers of Europe in general, could A, get rid of their own Jews safely, and B, carve up the arable land in the Middle East to their advantage, ignoring ethnographic data, ignoring the wishes of all people involved, except for a couple of wealthy white Jews who were in favor of the project. And I'm not saying that there aren't Zionist Jews. Of course there are. But Christian Zionism is way more common and more deadly, and is never about supporting the Jewish people. It's always about either getting rid of the Jews in their environment or bringing about the literal apocalypse. And again, if you want to know more, links in the doobly-doo. This situation is complex, and white settler colonialism is at the heart of it, and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in pretty equal measure. The reason that we get so worked up about specifically Israel committing these atrocious acts is anti-Semitism. not because we shouldn't be mad about it. Of course we should. Genocide is horrifying. But there's a difference between how we treat Israel and how we treat Canada, right? I don't see y'all still talking about the residential schools. So everybody's right and everybody's wrong. And it's heartbreaking and it's complex. And I'm not going to get everything right, and nobody's going to get everything right, because there is no right. The right answer is land back and stop being so hateful to everybody involved. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I think it's going to get worse for my Jewish and Arab friends in the diaspora. I've already heard incidents of new and creative versions of blood libel racketing around, and people hiding signs of their Judaism or keeping their kids from wearing Stars of David or whatever because of increased incidents of anti-Semitism already. I can't imagine what it's like in the parts of the world where it's, I mean, just even here, like, there's a huge dispute going on between the people who are saying free Palestine and the people who are saying pro-Israeli things, and, you know, like, I'm just asking you for your compassion, for your understanding that the right side here has consequences too, and that the people around you your words are affecting are not the ones fighting. And I know you think that from the river to the sea just means freedom. But only half the people who use that phrase mean that. And the other half mean genocide too. There is no in short. There is no in short. There's no short way to put this. I'm not pro-Israel. And I'm not pro-Hamas. And I never have been either. What I am is pro-people. Pro-humanity. Both sides here are not equivalent. The Palestinians deserve our respect and our elevation. They deserve our sanctuary. And the Jewish people also deserve respect and safety. This is happening because of wider anti-Semitism too. And as long as we all in the imperial core and in the Arab world and in basically everywhere believe in basic anti-Semitic talking points in blood libel and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was written up by a Russian propagandist trying to stave off communism. As long as it's not safe to simply be Jewish in the world, this kind of shit will still happen. As long as it's not safe to be Muslim in the world, this kind of shit will still happen. And I'm begging you to look at this with nuance in your heart. Check in on your Jewish friends. Check in on your Arab friends. We're not okay. I'm gonna be gone for a while. Try to keep learning.